I wonder from these talks and these podcasts that you do you ever have women saying, well, that's not a choice. We don't have that choice. We have to work now.
Mm.
And so, what do you tell to those families that kind of like go against this? Like, no, like daycare is not the best
So
option.
not all women have the same choices. We live in a country in America. I live in a country in America that has very few choices for poor women. And it's why I fight for paid leave. I mean, one of the reasons that I go around and talk like I do is to say, we are the most insensitive,
Yes.
uncivilized country in the world, other than Papua New Guinea. We're the only country that has no paid leave.
For dads and
We
women.
put capitalism and materialism and economic success over families and relationship. We talk a big game
Hmm.
about being family oriented. We are not. We do not like families. We do not like children. You have to put your money where your mouth is if you say you do. And we're very much into, particularly the Republican Party, but also now, the Democratic Party too. We're very much into self-sufficiency, sort of the pioneering spirit of America. We should all be able to do it on our own, pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and work hard and do it on our own. We shouldn't lean on the government or anybody else. Just independence, self-sufficiency, self-determinism, pioneering spirit. And the truth is that probably the majority of people in America do not have that ability. They've been raised in generational poverty.
Hmm.
They do not have access to education or opportunities, and they remain in, if they do at work, they remain in, very low paying, minimum wage kinds of jobs, and they can't afford to take off time when they have a child. Neither one of them. And many families work 2 and 3 jobs just to be able to pay their mortgage. So, and that's different than the middle and upper middle class and the affluent class in America. There is a working class in America and an impoverished class that desperately needs to have paid leave. And so this idea that we should all be self-sufficient is part of the pathology of our country. Because self-sufficiency is something that we can only achieve when we can lean on others. It's an offshoot. It is a byproduct and a developmental byproduct of being able to be dependent. So we have to be able to lean on others, including our government, if we want to eventually be more independent and self-sufficient. So the idea that from birth you should be self-sufficient. So, again, I'm going to say on the right, on the left, they say, go women, go working women, you go be part of the economy, compete with men, be out there. So they have their own shtick about it, which is, yes, we want to give you 3 months of paid leave, but then we want you to put your children in institutional care because you women should go out and work.
That's
so
right.
they don't really care about children.
Oh.
On the right, they say they care about children, but they don't want to pay anything to support families with children. And so then the idea is, of course, we want you to stay home, but we want you to do it on your own. Just stand on your own feet. And that's just not realistic for a good proportion of this, a good percentage of this country or any other country. I mean, if you look at any country, they have paid leave for a reason.
They do, even grandparents.
People who work in low paid jobs desperately need to have paid leave. So we could even, everybody talks about paid leave should be universal. I think in our country that probably is never going to happen. But I do believe that it could be needs-based. And I believe that the people who really need it, not the people who want it so they can have 2 cars or take a vacation or, get a bigger house or Chris Rufo, who's at the Manhattan Institute, said to me, we were having a conversation, and he said to me, and he's very Republican, and he said, part of the problem too is that people, I believe he said people's desires also increased. So whereas people used to be happy with a 2,000 square foot house with 4 bedrooms and everybody just had a tiny space, now the middle class has to have a 3,000 square foot house or a 4,000 square foot house and two cars, not one car, and take two vacations a year and buy new clothes for their children every school season and buy, the whole. When I was little, I used to go to Barnum and Bailey Circus with my family at Madison Square Garden. Then it was in Connecticut, in one of the kind of big kind of places in New Haven. I can't remember what it was called, but like a Madison Square Garden. And I remember it was big, like the elephants but it was big but manageable. I was little and it was big, and the noise was loud, but it was exciting. And as I got older, and I started taking my kids to Madison Square Garden for Barnum and Bailey. What I noticed is it got bigger, louder, more overstimulating, to the extent that I could no longer take my children to the circus. And then the circus shut down because no one was going to the circus because it got so big and loud. In the same way, we have grown in our greed as a nation in terms of how much is enough. And that's made it untenable for even middle-class families who used to have choices. So we do say housing is expensive and all these things are expensive. It's true. But the truth of the matter is our greed is a big part of it. Not for very poor people, no. But for middle class, upper middle class, wealthy people, it's greed. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to call it greed, but it is greed. We value our material success and pleasures over our children.
I agree with you 100%. And a wise man once said, children are not expensive. We are expensive.
That's right.
And it's so
That's
true.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think that if we can, as a society, and I know it's kind of hard to do and possibly might never happen, but if we can just have this minimalist mentality, I think everything would be manageable and we can stay home and take care of our children, because daycare is also very pricey. That's also a different expense.
And there's a lot of myths. Yeah. Yeah. So people have been told, and again, I blame this on the feminist movement, because daycare was part of the feminist agenda, right? And it's part of the capitalist agenda. It's part of the Democratic Party's agenda.
That's right.
Which is that, again, here we go. The Republican Party doesn't push for daycare. They push for families, but they don't want to pay for families to be together. The Democratic Party says they push for families, but they want kids in daycare, because in the end, capitalism is more important than children. In both parties, capitalism is more important than children. And that's really a problem. But what the myth that spread about daycare and started with the feminist movement is that it's good for children. And if you look at any of the kibbutz studies from Israel, you will see that it was a failed experiment. Mm-hmm. The idea of separating children from their parents, long days, long hours during the day, and even overnight, was a failed experiment. It actually traumatized children who needed attachment security to a primary attachment object, their parents, right? And so we know that this is a failed experiment, but what's happened is it's being promoted as being good for children, that it helps them to be smarter and get ready for school. And it's called school in Northern Europe.